Are you trying to learn and master Node-RED, but did not have a working Node-RED instance to get started? I'm going to show you how to create your own private instance of Node-RED up and running in less than 5 minutes, and it will cost you nothing. Let's get started. Following the previous episodes, we will continue the series on learning Tasmota. In last week's episode, we showed an easy and quick way to get started with MQTT using a publicly available test broker. In this and the next episode, we will continue on this theme with Node-RED. Unfortunately, there is no publicly available Node-RED instance that I could find on Google. The good news is that it is relatively easy to create one in a few minutes with very little work and complexity. So in this episode, we will create a Node-RED instance. In the next episode, we will build some middleware flows to create an online web dashboard for the Learning Tasmota PCB. In order to install Node-RED as quickly as possible, we will use a free platform as a service for application containers from Heroku.com. If you've never heard of Heroku, it's part of Salesforce.com. In a few clicks, we will build our own Node-RED container instance on which we can learn and master the technology. This should take less than 5 minutes to get set up. Here are the 3 steps that we will follow. First, we will create a free Heroku account. Next, we will go to a GitHub repository that includes a Node-RED for Heroku container, which can be built with a single click. Finally, we will log into the Node-RED instance and take a look around. In the bonus section of this episode, we will create a simple Node-RED flow that connects to the MQTT broker, which was implemented in episode 4. We will create a flow that simply presents the data from the temperature and light sensors into a debug window. Let's begin the first step by going to the Heroku.com website and creating a free account. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see the Sign Up button. Let's click on that button to get started. We will need to complete this form with our first and last name, our email address, and some other information. I will use some fictitious information in order to walk through this process. With this information complete, we can create a free account. An email will be sent to the email address from the form, which must be confirmed by clicking on the link. Once that's done, you'll be logged into the main page of Heroku. Of course, you will have no applications installed at this point. While there is an option to create a new application on the page, we're actually going to go to a GitHub page of someone who has already created a complete Node-RED container with a one-click mechanism to install it into a Heroku account. I already have a tab that has been opened up in my browser with this project in GitHub. The URL is in the notes below this video for your reference. If we scroll down to the bottom of the GitHub project page and look at the README area, you will see a purple Deploy to Heroku button. By clicking on this button, it will start the process, assuming we are already logged into Heroku in the same browser context. As we can see above, at the beginning of this page, it's telling us what we will be doing momentarily. We will be deploying our own Node-RED application instance, and it will be using the following GitHub repository. Strictly speaking, there are only 2 fields that will need to be completed at this point. For this instance, we will need to create login credentials that will be used when we access the Node-RED portal. For some strange reason, it prompts us for the password first and then the username, which is a bit backwards. I will be using the password marktroyer.tech 2021 and the username marktroyer. I also recommend choosing Europe as a region. For some strange reason, the installation process currently fails if the United States was selected as the region. Hopefully this problem will have been noticed by someone from Heroku and resolved before you try to go through this process yourself. We'll just deploy this to Europe as a region at this point. Once this is done and you've completed the password and username, we simply need to click on the purple Deploy App button at the bottom of the screen. the application will immediately start being installed. If you scroll down the page, you can watch the installation process. The log for the installation process can be viewed later once the process is complete. The installation time of this Node-RED container is around 30 to 45 seconds. This is the hardest part of the installation. As it is not enough time to get a coffee, perhaps you can count your breath for 7 to 8 times. We will fast forward through the remaining installation process in the interest of time. As we can see, the application is now installed. We can now click the Manage App button to see the status of the container instance, or as they call it in Heroku, a dyno. There are a couple of important things you need to note about Heroku. To start, this application was given an application name called dry-ref-30446. This is a semi-random name that could have been overwritten with something more specific. This is important because this name is part of the subdomain in the URL to access the application on herokuapp.com. This will be the entry point where we will access the instance of Node-RED. The other important detail is that each application, or as they call it, a dyno, has different service levels. Each dyno can have a free, hobbyist, or several levels of a professional status. In this case, we only have a free account. This will work perfectly fine for learning and mastering. However, a Node-RED dyno will sleep after not having been used for a while. That's for the free versions, that is. I don't remember how many hours per day is provided with a free dyno, but I believe it's 4 or 5, so there are some limitations. With that said, free beer is free beer. You cannot complain. Now let's click on the Open App button in the upper right-hand corner to log into the Node-RED application. As we can see from the URL at the top of the page, the name of this application is called dry-ref-30446.herokuapp.com. This is the entry page that you will need to save as a browser bookmark for future use. Of course, you can always go back to your Heroku account, open up this dyno, and click on the Open App button. There's a lot of good information on this entry page explaining more about Node-RED. But we're going to immediately go to our Node-RED editor. We will need to enter the username and password that we provisioned before we installed the application. In this case, the username is again marktroyer, and the password is marktroyer.tech 2021. We are now logged into the Node-RED palette, which is the key entry point to Node-RED. It took us less than 5 minutes to create a Node-RED account, install Node-RED, and then log in. That's quite remarkable. This is a much easier way to get started with Node-RED compared to having to install it on your own Raspberry Pi, PC, or Mac. This is especially true if you've never used Node-RED and perhaps you're not convinced about its benefits or are not sure about what you are doing. Now it is time for the bonus section. To finish things off, we will create a simple 2-node sequence with a debug node and an MQTT in node. First, however, let's define some key Node-RED terminology, including nodes, sequences, and flows. Nodes are elements of programming logic that can be customized to a standard set of parameters. They're basically the primitive elements of Node-RED. Sequences are several nodes that are linked together to create a programming chain. And finally, flows are a collection of sequences that are closely related. They are held in a Node-RED tab. On the left-hand side of the flow palette, we see the node palette. Node-RED comes with over 35 pre-installed nodes. Additional nodes can be added or built to further extend the functionality. There are over 3,000 user source node modules available today that can be added to the node palette. Let's start off by adding in a debug node, since it is the one most commonly used, especially for learning and testing. It is also at the top of the list. Let's drag and drop this node into the palette and then click on it to make a simple change. We will configure it to output the complete message object for the purposes of learning. This data will be viewable in the debug area. Let's click Done to save the changes. Now let's look for a specialized node, which is part of the MQTT node family. To quickly find this node, I will simply type MQTT in the search panel of the node panel. 2 MQTT nodes have resulted in the list. MQTT in, which is used to subscribe to an MQTT topic, and also MQTT out, and that's used to publish to an MQTT topic. In this case, we want to subscribe to the topic used for our Learning Tasmota PCB sensor data. We will therefore drag the MQTT in node into the palette just to the left of the debug node. We will now connect both of these nodes together so that when an incoming subscribe MQTT message arrives, it will be forwarded immediately to the debug node. It will then be displayed in the debug area over to the right. We will first specify the name of the MQTT broker and the username and password used. In this case, we will be using the test.mosquito.org test broker. Since this is an open broker, no credentials are needed. To set this up, we start by clicking on the pencil icon to add the broker. There's only one field that must be completed, which is the DNS name of the broker. This is, of course, test.mosquito.org. There are no credentials that must be completed because this is an open broker. Every other field can be left with the default values. We only have to click Add. Now we need to put in the MQTT topic for this node configuration. To find this, I will open up a web browser tab to the web interface of the Learning Tasmota PCB. On my Wi-Fi access point, it got an address of 192.168.1.91. With the web interface loaded, I simply need to go to the console menu option. I'm looking for the telemetry topic of the sensor data that is sent out regularly. We left the last episode by changing this to every 30 seconds. Here it is. In this case, the topic is tele/Tasmota _ and I won't mention the number, /sensor. Let's copy this topic string and paste it into the node configuration field. Now we click Done. Let's move this node over to the left a little bit for purely readability purposes. To deploy the sequence, I simply need to click on the upper Deploy button in the upper right-hand corner. If everything was successful, we will see a successfully deployed message that pops up. We will also see a connected indicator next to the MQTT node that indicates that the node has connected with our MQTT broker and subscribed to the configured topic, in this case, the censored data. In principle, everything should be working at this point. Over to the right, we already have the debug area open. We should start to see MQTT messages arrive with the censored data as the Learning Tasmota PCB sends data every 30 seconds. The first message has just arrived. We can see lots of debug information about the incoming message. We can see the time, the topic, the payload, which happens to be a JSON string. We can see that the light level is 1972 and the temperature is 22.0. Let's go ahead and wrap up. In 5 minutes, we created our own running instance of Node-RED on the free Heroku.com cloud service. We then built a simple 2-node sequence that presents the sensor data from our Learning Tasmota PCB. We are now ready to build a Node-RED dashboard for our Learning Tasmota PCB. This will follow in the next episode of marktroyer.tech. Were you able to follow along with these steps in this episode? If not, please let me know what was missing. If you were able to follow, did everything work for you as expected? I would love to hear from you. Please send me a comment and I will respond. All of the steps and links provided in this episode are in the notes below. If you found this video interesting or useful, please like it. I'm trying to get this channel off the ground and would appreciate your feedback on the topics I've covered so far. That is all for this episode. Thank you for joining. This is Mark at marktroyer.tech signing off.